Zach Street is a Law and Society major. Zach is a member of our mock trial team and actually won a important prize in our last competition, so I'm building him up a little bit for the next competition. Zach is going to be taking the opposite position that Sarah just took. He's going to be basing his research on the ABA amicus brief. So with no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Zach Street.
Good evening. As you know, my name is Zach Street. I'm a Law and Society student, and I am here to discuss the American Bar Association's position on the immigration bill passed in Arizona. The American Bar Association is a voluntary association of attorneys who have passed the exam to become a lawyer. This exam is known as the bar. The organization comprises of more than 400,000 attorneys and is based on a code of ethical standards, which was first ratified in 1969. Their mission is to serve everyone equally, to defend liberty while delivering justice as national representatives to the legal profession. In other words, they defend the Constitution and those who believe their rights have been violated. The organization is highly influential within the court system of America, and because of that influence, the ABA is respectfully submitting an amicus brief to the District Court of Arizona. An amicus brief is a legal briefing of a case from an outsider to the procedure. In the case of the United States versus the state of Arizona, the ABA respectfully submits a viewpoint on the constitutionality of the case at hand. In other words, they are presenting evidence to the court based on whether or not it follows our Constitution. Because the ABA is not part of the case itself, this amicus brief serves merely as an opinion. But briefs such as this are not usually submitted to any court other than the highest court of the land, whether it be the state Supreme Court or the federal Supreme Court. However, it is the ABA's opinion that this case is of such great importance to the well-being of the country as a whole and to individual rights of citizens of America that they are submitting it to the District Court of Arizona. The American Bar Association clearly states that the passing of SB 1070 is a state's attempt at usurpation of exclusive federal authority to make immigration law. This argument stems from the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. The clause reads, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land." In Article 6 of that same Constitution, the authority to control immigration is vested solely in the federal government. The Supreme Court of the United States has backed this idea with cases such as Truax versus Ray, which dealt with alien employment in the same state of Arizona in 1915. According to the ABA, Arizona's attempt at individual state authority confronting a national issue is a clear attempt to usurp or steal exclusive federal authority. The second argument submitted by the ABA is that if SB 1070 were to pass, the uniformity in immigration law and immigration law enforcement that is essential to the federal government's ability to maintain consistent national immigration policies and foreign relations would be at jeopardy. For example, if Arizona is allowed to enact this law, it would set a precedent for other states to follow suit. The result would be that every state would have a different immigration policy, which would naturally lead to individual state foreign policies. How can the United States have a global voice when each and every state supports different global governments? The ensuing consequence would dissolve the unity and the unified voice the world knows as America. SB 1070 gives federal authority to local and state police officers who derive their power from local and state law rather than federal policy. As a result, Arizona's state and local criminal law enforcement personnel will engage in civil immigration activities. This will only lead to officers stopping and detaining persons not based on national immigration policy, but rather from local standards that are developed within their jurisdiction and communities, not to mention their own regional bias. This bill will also grant local and state police officers the power to detain an individual for whom they have formed a reasonable suspicion that the individual is unlawfully present in the U.S. They may also make a reasonable attempt, when practicable, to determine the immigration status of an individual. Now, what does this mean? The Arizona immigration bill will naturally lead to violations of the civil rights of legal and non-legal immigrants in the United States. Beyond that, every law enforcement personnel and organization has the ability to ignore current laws that are irrelevant or too costly to enforce. For example, marijuana violations are often ignored by police officers because of the burdens the cases have on the court system in the state. The individual cop has the power of discretion to turn a blind eye, so to speak. This is the case in Arizona. The federal immigration enforcement has the power of discretion not to arrest individuals. Even though this is happening, it still does not permit the individual state to ignore federal policy and enact its own laws, especially on an issue that is so involved with the well-being of the United States. This bill also requires those with reasonable suspicion of being illegal to carry with them identification that proves their status in this country. Beyond the fact that it isn't illegal not to carry an identification in America, the detention of suspected aliens will result if they cannot present valid ID, even if they have not committed any crimes at all. The ABA reminds the court of the wrongful detention of citizens from the police in Arizona in the past. The local and state cops who will be in charge of detaining aliens have had past problems with racial profiling against Hispanics. Even with a 4-week training course, officers in the state were still being charged. The point the ABA is trying to make here is, what is reasonable suspicion of being illegal? Beyond the obvious of hearing voices from a suspected trunk or hands sticking out from under the seat of your car, how is an officer going to determine legal status? Is he to walk up to every single person on the street and ask them for ID? Of course not. The ensuing result will be racial profiling. Even without this bill, the police in Arizona have repeatedly detained immigrants or even full-blooded citizens, not based on the crimes they committed, but rather based on the color of their skin. The Office of Inspector General to the United States issued a report regarding the federal policy of immigration with the Department of Homeland Security, who is currently in charge of immigration policies. The report stated, one aspect of the Department of Homeland Security's primary mission is to ensure that civil rights and civil liberties are not diminished by its efforts, activities, and programs. This is backed by the fact that every person who works for the federal government, and in this case the Department of Homeland Security, has at the very least a college education. They are trained to prevent racial profiling while still performing their duties. The police in Arizona, however, are not required to have a college education. They are merely given a 4-week training course. A report in 2008 to the ABA House of Delegates discusses the same issue. They state that new evidence of possible racial profiling by the Arizona Department of Public Safety, showing that highway patrol officers were more than twice as likely to search vehicles driven by Hispanics or blacks than those operated by Anglos during 2006. These past statements are evidence enough that racial profiling will only increase with the enforcement of this bill and will violate the rights of American citizens who have not committed any crime at all. The American Bar Association concludes with this statement. As mandated by the Constitution, federal statutory law, and decades of Supreme Court authority, and as urged by ABA policy passed by our House of Delegates, states should not be permitted to enforce individual immigration laws such as SB 1070. Rather, it is the federal government that is charged with establishing, maintaining, and enforcing uniform immigration policy. It is therefore the ABA's opinion that the Arizona law is unconstitutional.